With the holiday now behind them, the West Virginia Mountaineers coaching staff is back to work, and they have been very, very busy as the Mountaineers have been adding about 20 transfer additions right now and more to come. They're only really halfway there to rebuild the roster from what they lost so far, and the transfer portal has not closed. So there's still time, but a lot of work we've already seen and more to come on the football side, and a big basketball game coming up as well. Mike Asti joined by Luke Blain, and Mountaineer Report is back in your ears and on your screen. It's been a minute for us as well after a holiday break. Kind of strained my voice, but I'm going to power through with the pineapple juice nonetheless. Holidays over. New Year's has transitioned, and it is now fully back into the swing here for West Virginia sports now. Not that we haven't been working and covering to this point. So, Luke, I mean, the football staff has been really, really, really busy. I'm not sure they really got a break. I'm not really sure they got a break at all. And we're now seeing the fruits of that labor here, especially this week, even today, as we record this show on a Friday. They get 3 on a Friday when really nobody is working or making much news on kind of a slow Friday. Where are you before we fully get into this? Where are you in terms of what they lost, what they're adding? They do have a top 10 rank right now on 3 Sports, 247, not as high on them. But it does appear for me, at least, even though there's a lot more to see and it's hard to gauge anything right now, that it's hard to be too upset, I guess, if you're a Mountaineer fan on what's been added. There are a significant amount of power forward transfers coming in. There are a significant amount of starters coming in. One of the non-power forward transfers that comes in is the leading rusher in the country in Cam Cook. So they're getting impact players who have the experience, who are top recruits that were at one point recruited by power forward programs to come aboard. It's not enough right now, but it's hard for fans, I would imagine, unless you just want to be negative, to really hate what the work has been so far.
No, I definitely think that there's a lot of good things happening for WVU in the transfer portal. I mean, the transfers out were some of the players that you would consider some of their more high-end talent, specifically guys like Cam Vaughn, Rodney Gallagher, Jahiem White, obviously. But a big critique that I had going into last season was the lack of real contributors at the P4 level, and not a lot of G6 talent, other than, or high-end G6 talent, excuse me, other than guys like Cam Vaughn and Fred Perry. And, they're definitely, I think, making much better moves this offseason. They're adding a lot of offensive line depth to combine with the freshman signees that they have. Malik Hawkins is looking good. The Hawkins brothers from Oklahoma, obviously,
Right.
and, Malachi Hood from Illinois. They're getting some really good players that I think could really look to step into key roles for this
Yeah.
team. And, I think looking at last year, you really didn't know who was going to be where. It kind of seemed like a flat line in terms of talent, very little wavering. But I
Right.
definitely think that there's some much better high-end talent coming into the portal this season.
Yeah, it's not enough yet, and they have more to do. And I think the issue, to be a little critical, is while they cut a myriad of players again, and that's just the Rich Rod way of life, especially off a 4-8 season. So they did cut a myriad of players again. There were some transfer departures that did come as a surprise from who I've talked to, and even from what Rich Rod was saying in his press conferences towards the end of the season. He did kind of make, I think, why fans were upset when they saw the departures, even the ones that were expected, even the depth pieces, even knowing that he was going to make some cuts. He was saying that is not nearly going to be what it was last year. We're not going to have to repair as much of the roster. We're only going to have to bring in 6 to 12 transfers to fill holes, etc. I want to keep most of the team because I want to implement my culture and I don't have to start from scratch all over again. And then you see about 40 players depart and you're saying to yourself, well, that's more than you were saying. You're going to have to implement your culture all over again and try a lot of these new players out, no matter who they are. That's more work than you said and you let on. I think that's where some fans were getting really negative when they saw all the departures. However, to be fair to Rich Rodriguez and the staff, and this bears out in most of the national ranks and just really based on the prospects that are now being added, even off high school recruiting, and even certainly off of the Power Four transfers that are coming in, and really all the transfers in general. It does appear the roster is better than it was at this point a year ago, to say the least. It does appear they were able to do more work in the offseason than they were able to a year ago. They only had their intro presser on December 20th a year ago. So they didn't have as much time to do all of this as they have this year. And it does appear that just simply on the transfers, the transfer additions, for the most part, are better players than the transfer departures. And most of the transfer departures are still depth pieces or players that were cut. There were definitely some hits for sure. I don't think they were shocked by Jahiem White, but Dior Hubbard, I do kind of think surprised them. Curtis Jones, they thought they were keeping, and then a few days ago, he changes agents, and all of a sudden he's now going in the portal. That does sting a little bit because they wanted versatility, and he certainly can do a lot and was doing a lot on both sides of the ball. Cam Vaughn's a surprise for fans, but from what I heard all season, I even said it on this show to you, I'm not surprised by that departure. I kind of thought he lost favor most of the year, but some they definitely didn't want to lose, and they did anyway for whatever reason. But at the end of the day, I do think the additions are better players for the most part collectively than the departures. Which, if you're going to have to build a roster all over again and add 40 new players, you'd at least want them to be better than the previous guys, of course. Last year, and they weren't his players from the year earlier, they were Neal Brown's, but it appeared that despite being a coach with more cachet, the players coming in were very similar to what Neal Brown was working with. He later would say the money was very similar to what Neal Brown was working with. The resources weren't there. It appears again that they're utilizing the resources that have been increased and are now rectified properly and are bringing in better players. Nothing is a guarantee. But I will even add here that even talking with coaches around the country, many of which are not working at West Virginia, they are more impressed by the transfer additions this year than last year. And last year, you would just hear from all of them, those players are going to be misses. They're just not good enough. And then you had all the injuries. So they're doing a better job this year, I would definitely say.
Yeah, I would have to agree. And like you said, I think that comes with having more time. You have obviously they've had much more communication with these guys than they
Yeah.
were able to with the transfers last season. You really weren't being, you didn't have
Yeah.
that head. Everybody else had a head start to all the top tier talent in the portal,
Yeah.
and you're still trying to assemble your staff. That's just not going to work, and that resulted in what we saw last year. That, like you said, also combined with the myriad of injuries that just ruined that roster last season. So I definitely think that you're going to see a more established WVU team this season. I think you're going to see players who fit into their roles better than
Yeah.
you might have expected from last year. And also, I think the offensive line is just going to be flat out better. I think
That's
they got
a
some
big
really
deal.
good offensive line talent. That's a huge deal. I think that
Yeah.
was the biggest issue with the offense was easily the offensive line. Um, and even with how quick the scheme is for WVU, they didn't even have time to execute that in some of these games. So the offensive line, I
Yeah.
definitely think is going to be more established, and you're going to have some competition. I think a lot of people expected those two freshman tackles to come in and just kind of take the lead. Rich Run hit on those as well in the portal, so you're definitely going to see some
Yeah.
competition. I think that Rich Rod is absolutely trying to find the best depth he can at every position.
Yeah.
And, we're going to have to, still, I think we need to see some of that on the defensive side as well, especially with some of the transfers out that we've seen there. And in particular, there was just such a lack of consistency on that side of the ball. But I think the offense being better will result in the defense being better, as in the defense doesn't have to spend over half the football game on the field.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the nail on the head. The defense wasn't good enough last year, and they had their really rough moments, but they were also out there a lot. That
Yeah.
Ohio game, which that's one loss that if you add that to the ledger, then you're only one away from a bowl game, and right here. They were 1 yard basically away repeatedly from beating Arizona State. If you had Ohio and ASU, and they could have had other wins, even with all the injuries and a rough roster, that would have at least been a 6-win team to make a bowl game in year one. So that's really, even though they were 4-8, for a glass half full take here, I guess, they were closer to bowl eligibility than people probably give them credit. Again, the offense was anemic against Ohio. And if you win that game, you're one away, and then you certainly could have swung one of the other games. So now this roster does appear at minimum to be at that point. I'm sure that Rich Rodriguez is going to open up spring ball and do the same song and dance and say that nobody is penciled in as RB1, WR1. We'll get into the quarterback battle here in a moment, or even any of the positions. But I do feel right now, which is a positive and something that you kind of were hitting on there, that if you just left it as is, and even if you kept who you had last year in the offensive line, which clearly was not good enough, and I'm pretty sure that if this program ever does win a Big 12 title with Rich Rod, this is going to become an image that'll live in infamy, because Rich Rodriguez, after a game this past year, did this and kept saying how he could not believe how they couldn't get this 1 yard. And if they can't get this yard, then he doesn't even want to go out there with the team. He just went on a rant about this much room to get 1 yard. And now the running back that couldn't get this yard is gone. The offensive line that couldn't get this yard is gone. They bring in Cam Cook in particular, who I think he can get this yard. He can get this yard. He had almost 1,700 yards last year, even at Jack State. He can get this yard. They need more backs as well, but they brought in others. And the offensive line, in terms of their size, not only did they get a power 4 addition on the O-line, but even the non-power 4 transfers, even Griffin at Jack State, he's just bigger. You look at the size they're listed on, and nothing is a lock. Who knows how they really are in height and weight, because programs sometimes fudge those numbers. But even what they're listed as is just bigger than what the players were listed as last year, will help them get this yard. But if they didn't do any of that work, Kevin Brown, who looks like a Marvel superhero, would be a part of the offensive line. And he would certainly be an improvement to what you had last year, even as a recruit. But they brought in enough talent now, Luke, that I think that, and they're going to play Kevin Brown, of course. He's getting a lot of money. He's a 4-star recruit. They brought him over after flipping him from Penn State. They're going to play him. But they don't have to rely on him as much now. They have size with the rest of the line. They brought in a power 4 transfer from K-State as well. It doesn't have to be that if Kevin Brown is not an All-American right away, that they're screwed. They can play him, but he'll be next to offensive linemen that have power 4 experience already, that are already bigger and already ready to go. And then you get Kevin Brown in the weight room and build him up more. If you didn't do this work, you'd put even more pressure on Kevin Brown. So that's a major positive. For the negatives right now that I'm not seeing enough of and we need to see more of, but again, they're still likely going to add 20 more players in the portal, as insane as that sounds. More from the defensive line, more from the secondary. So far, what they've probably done the best at is bringing an offensive lineman, obviously Michael Hawkins as a quarterback veteran, and then wide receivers, multiple power 4 transfer wide receivers. That's a big deal. They're also competing against other power 4 schools for these kids. And that wasn't as much the case the last couple years, but needing more from the defense, even though they won't be on the field as often, you would imagine, still needing more from the defense. I would not be surprised if you see the most of the next group, the next wave next week of commitments be defensive players. Would not be surprised at all. Luke Blain, Mike Asti here, Mountaineer Report, West Virginia Sports Now. You can find us everywhere you get your podcasts, and of course here on YouTube and throughout the West Virginia Sports Now network. But Luke, in addition to seeing all these additions, the one talking point from all of these additions, beyond everything that we've already discussed, is the quarterback position. And that is the one position that has already had a polarizing conversation from the addition. Michael Hawkins Jr. is now a Mountaineer. He's actually even signed. So he's a Mountaineer. His brother as well that you mentioned there, Malik Hawkins, will help the secondary. So you're getting 2 for 1. Other schools wanted him. He's coming to West Virginia. He's a dual threat. He's played at the Power 4 level, not just recruited by a Power 4 school, but actually played. Jalen Henderson was recruited by one, but Michael Hawkins actually has P4 experience. He has solid numbers. He's done it with his arm and with his legs, and he really fits the Rich Rod system. That's what everyone I've talked to has also said. It feels like he's ready to go. It feels like he's likely going to be your starter. It feels like he gives you a step up from Scotty Fox. And if you have to try to win a conference title right away, and Rich Rod has pressure to try to win right away, then he would be the better option. They're going to battle. Nothing's guaranteed. I imagine he has the edge. But Luke, where are you on bringing in a player like him in general? And if you do think he's going to have the edge and should probably be the starter, we're only talking here in January. But there are a lot of fans that are kind of upset about his addition a little bit because, in a way, there are some that wanted to see Scotty Fox have the reins and be the starter and be the guy this year. He emerged last year. He ended up being the guy who's left after everybody else leaves. And he certainly showed flashes of brilliance last year, even though he had some issues as well. Another year in the system, he fits the system too. Could make him even better. But I would find it hard to imagine that Michael Hawkins Jr. is not your starter based on him coming over from Oklahoma, based on what he's getting paid, and based on his pedigree to this point.
Yeah, well, I think when it comes to wanting to see a specific player, I don't think Rich Rod particularly cares. I think
He
I
does
think
not. He
that
does not care.
no,
No.
no, I feel like I don't. I think I can drop the "I think" part of that statement. I Rich Rod is going to put the players out there that he feels has the best potential to help them win.
Yeah.
And he could, like I mentioned earlier, he could have stopped recruiting at the offensive line position, but he went ahead and got some more tackles and some more interior linemen because you need to be able to have a good rotation of players that you feel if one guy gets injured, the other guy can step up as well. I mean, look at last year for
Yeah.
WVU. The starting quarterback got hurt, was not able to go for the rest of the season, and you kept having to rotate throughout your other quarterbacks, whether it be injury or just not playing well enough. And
Yeah.
who's behind Scotty Fox anyway? I think Max Brown is still on the roster, but Scotty Fox, if he goes down, how many options do you have behind him? Even if you do start Scotty, you need to be able to have somebody behind him. But
Yeah.
also, I think Hawkins is a very talented player. And I think, based on the clips, he looks faster than Scotty Fox. And we know that Rich Rod likes the mobile quarterback in his system.
Yeah.
And
Yes, he does.
he absolutely looks faster. I mean, the only play I've really seen from Hawkins on social media is that, like, 60-yard rushing touchdown that he had.
Yeah.
I can't remember the opponent, but he did it. He went out there and he made some plays for an SEC team. So, you need to be able to have options to where if one guy doesn't work out, if one guy gets hurt, the next guy up can step in there as well and go out there and make plays. And like you said earlier, we're not seeing that as much on the defense, but I would be very confident along with you in saying that WVU is going to fix that problem and probably land some defensive transfers here soon. And it's not meaning to say that you're never going to see Scotty Fox this season if he remains a
Yeah.
Mountaineer and isn't the starter. There's I mean, it's not like he's hit the portal yet, right? So he'll still be on the team, but
Right.
he's going to have to battle for his position just like Nico Markiel did last year.
Yeah. And again, if you are a fan, here's what always baffles me. The fans that want Rich Rod to win right away are also the same ones often who get married to certain players and want to have Scotty Fox a starter because he quote unquote deserves it. Now, Nico Markiel deserved it last year, but he also won the job in camp and he earned the right to start. It bared out that he didn't really fit the system, even though maybe they thought they could get something to happen with him. It didn't really work. And then he got hurt and it just didn't work. And then with all the injuries, the season was really going nowhere. And nobody was really able to really get their footing because with injuries, the offensive line being so bad, it just unraveled in a bad way for the program, certainly once they hit Big 12 play. Now to bring in, and it's not like you're bringing in a former 13 game starter that's already won a conference title, but you have a kid who was a top recruit who's played and made plays at the Power 4 level in the SEC. So the competition you've seen him play against is better competition than what you would get out of a kid if he's just coming from high school or from a G5 or whatever. And he's made plays for Oklahoma, and that's a positive. The fact that he's bringing in a defensive back as his brother is just like a throw in. That's pretty nice too, because they need a lot of help over there. And Michael Hawkins fits the system. While Scotty Fox does, Michael Hawkins fits into that system more to me. And we're not coaches. We have to see them on the field. I'm sure no one's going to be crowned anything. And I'm sure that Rich Rodriguez is going to push back and freak out if anybody says, well, do you want to name a starter? What's the depth chart looking like here early into spring ball? But I would imagine that Michael Hawkins will win this job and earn this job. And there's not a spring portal window now. So, Luke, if that occurs, unlike last year, then Scotty Fox would be forced to stay. I mean, he would be there. There is no other window. This is it. We're recording this on January 9th. Unless we get another decision from him based on, where we are right now. And by the way, Luke, I think it's pretty clear that if we get that decision from him in the next few days before the portal window closes, I think we've crowned our starting quarterback at that point then, if we would get some about face from Scotty Fox. But if that does not occur, then he's going to be on this team. And I'm sure that both will play this year. Both will get time. If you also remember, mostly from fall camp, Rich Rodriguez started mentioning that he wasn't against having multiple quarterbacks get a lot of time, even have a 1A, 1B, if not have a co-startership. He even cited that Florida did it when they won a national title with Tim Tebow, who actually was the backup the first time around that they won, but he had a lot of time. So maybe Rich will do that. Maybe if everybody's healthy, he'll play both. Maybe one will be the starter and the other one will still get 20 snaps a game. I mean, there are some that don't like that, don't think that'll win in this day and age, but maybe he'll do that. And, as we're talking portal here, I think one thing we need to throw out there, even beyond the quarterback position, but just any position in general, even though they're getting more Power 4 transfers, and that is a good thing. They have more money. They're getting more high-end talent, as you put it. That's a perfect way to say it. They're getting more high-end talent with a higher ceiling. It doesn't mean that you can't also elevate lower-tier talent. We just watched a JUCO quarterback take his team to the semifinals of the CFP. Trinidad was a JUCO QB that Lane Kiffin matured and made a great player, and then he did it on his own after Lane Kiffin leaves. It can happen. Ty Edwards last year for West Virginia gashed Pitt in the backyard brawl. That's a JUCO player. It can happen. There are JUCO players that can be elevated with a great staff and perform. You can't have a whole team of those players, though, and the problem was in 2025, it felt like 70% of the roster were either FCS, JUCO players, or group of fives. That doesn't work. This is now a more talented, higher end roster, even though those type of players are still going to be sprinkled in. They still have some JUCO players. They're still going to rely on high school recruiting, and you still do have some lower tier, UConn type players from lower tier schools or FCS players. They may come aboard as well, but there's a significant amount of higher end talent that right there makes you feel better. I would imagine that, because you never know exactly what the books are like. I mean, I have sources, people say things, we can all guess kind of where the money is. Neal Brown even made the comment a couple years ago to tell us what the money was, but we all thought we knew where the money was last year. And then Rich Rod would say, it's not there. And that's why the roster was so bad. Was that an excuse? Was that the case? Were they holding back money? What was reality? I think it's clear, Luke, just based on who they're adding and even what they did in high school recruiting, they obviously had more money to play with. And if they were holding the money back from last year, which some conspiracy theorists believe that they intentionally held money back and they were punting the season despite saying they had to win and they were making it all about this year, if that's true, Luke, that's a good thing for this year because last year's over. So it already happened, even if maybe it shouldn't have last year. Again, Luke Blain, Mike Asti, Mountaineer Report here, West Virginia Sports Now. We mentioned the defense. Is there anything else you'd like to see in the remaining days of this transfer portal? Any more work that this staff still needs to do outside of what's already happened with these 20 transfer additions so far as we're talking?
I'm a big believer that you can never have too many wide receivers, especially
Yeah,
and receivers or running backs, particularly in a system like Rich Rod's, where you're going to run the ball so much, and you need to have guys who can catch the
yeah,
ball as well. And you're losing Cam Vaughn and Rodney Gallagher, and those are two guys who you were
yeah,
able to rely on this past season. I am heartbroken that we won't see the Rodney Gallagher jet sweep ever again at
yeah. I
WVU,
know,
but
I
it
know.
was fun. It was fun while it lasted.
Yeah,
But I there need and there are players on this roster who can step up as well. Some guys who stuck around from last
yeah.
season, and maybe they will. Getting an LSU
Jaden
wide
Bray might be
receiver is
back. He should have another
Jaden
year
Bray
because of
might
all
be
the
back.
injuries. Because of all the injuries, he might actually be back, and he is a veteran who has Big 12 experience even before West Virginia, and he can kind of do it
Yeah,
all. He's a muscular receiver. I mean, we have basically not seen him for 2 years, and the
yeah.
hype around him was really high out of Oklahoma State.
Yeah, no, and I mean, in a league like the Big 12, I definitely, where defense isn't its strong suit, other than, a few teams at the top.
Yeah,
I think as many offensive weapons as you can get is going to be what helps you compete in this league.
yeah. Yeah, that's the thing too. And we've even heard that from coaches at other programs. Like, for example, when James Franklin got to Virginia Tech, one of the first things he said was, I got to bring in some top tier receivers here. I did not do that at Penn State. That's part of why I missed winning a national title at Penn State. That was the one position we didn't do enough at, was getting a top flight receiver. And that's really true. That's why they hit a ceiling. And then it was, a situation where they fell off the cliff this past year. Rich Rod knows that. And that's why I can tell you they made a push for Chris Henry Jr., who's going to be an impact player right away as a freshman. He's already proving it and showing it. He's a legit 5-star. He didn't come. He didn't follow his dad's legacy. That's fine. It's his own life. He's at Ohio State. But they tried to get him, and they were going to offer him a lot more money than you'd ever imagine WVU would offer any player. It would have broke all kinds of records for any sport in West Virginia. But they were doing it for a reason, Luke. It wasn't like they were trying to flush it down the toilet. They were doing it because, and they might have got criticism on how are you giving it all to one man? Well, because that position can be a game breaker for you. If you're going to be good but not great at defense, if you're going to be good but not great at different positions on the team, if your team overall is going to be maybe good but not great, what can elevate you and win some games and help you come back in a game or help you strangle a team, help you turn a game around in one play? A top tier receiver like a Chris Henry Jr. They don't have him, but getting that guy would be big. They brought in power for transfer receivers. They do have Jaden Bray and a few others still on this team. I would say that's maybe the one criticism outside the defense. I don't, as much as I thought Cam Vaughn probably would leave, and I knew he lost favor on the team, and the coaches were sick of him, the staff members were sick of him. I'm not shocked he's gone. He was a game breaker. There's not really a game breaker now on the team. The receivers that have been brought in are a little different. They're not exactly Cam Vaughn. There's certainly not a Chris Henry Jr. on this roster. They're not going to be a top tier Big 12 team until they get that guy. So we will see if they try to get that guy remaining here, left in the portal, or what that looks like. Again, Luke Blain, Mike Asti here, Mountaineer Report with West Virginia Sports Now. Now, before we touch on a really big basketball game coming up and how this team has looked recently, you've been at all those games and covering those games, at least in Morgantown, but even covering the games on the road from afar. Jahiem White is now reuniting with Neal Brown and Chad Scott at North Texas. Jahiem White was a Doak Walker Award Watch player last year coming into the season, got hurt. We only saw him for a game and a half, and then that's it for him as a Mountaineer. Obviously, the Mayo Bowl year, he was a stud. He was a beast. He was great in that game, and that's why he was gaining hype even going into last season under Rich Rodriguez. In that system, we just didn't get to see it for more than a game and a half. And even in 2024, the end of the Neal Brown tenure, he was one of the better backs in the conference for sure. Are you at all surprised? And obviously there's a connection there, so it's not really surprising in a way, but I will ask it this way. Are you at all surprised that Jahiem White's value around the country clearly has fallen to the level that he is just going to rely on his friends of Neal Brown and Chad Scott to bring him aboard at North Texas? It is a group of 5 program. There might be money in Denton, Texas. There's more money there than maybe some other group of 5 programs may have. Neal Brown does have a track record from a P4 and did coach him before to success, even though obviously didn't have enough success at West Virginia. We've seen now with the CFP in the current format, unless it's changed, you win a group of 5 conference, you could get in the CFP. I've ranted about it. I don't think it's necessarily the best idea or the fairest, at least not 2 of them. But nonetheless, it's a path right now that exists. So maybe that's a positive way to spin this, and maybe it'll work out for him. He'll probably run up yards at North Texas. But are you at all surprised that that's where he is, just for the fact that if this was a year ago after the 2024 season and he was in the portal, his value would have been way higher, and he would be at probably a Power 4, if not in the Big Ten or the SEC, etc. He was thought of as that type of back from coaches at those schools, and yet he now falls back with Neal Brown.
Well, I think there's something to be said about his recent history of injuries, particularly the tear he
Yeah.
suffered this past season against Ohio University. And, there's definitely something to be said for those player coach relationships. And whenever you get Chad Scott and Neal Brown reunited in North Texas, and, he's not the only one. There are several former WVU players that
Yeah,
played under Neal Brown
100%.
that are now heading to North Texas. I don't,
And that
I
makes sense,
really,
but Jahiem stands out for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, exactly. Jahiem is definitely like more of a standout player that you think could play at a P4 team. Um, I think when it comes to player coach relationships, that he was obviously the first. His first team was with WVU with Neal Brown and Chad Scott, and
Yeah.
they were able to bring that level of play out of him. I remember seeing him in the spring ball game before his freshman season and thinking he could be very good, and they obviously brought that out of him as well. I think
Yeah.
there's, as a player, I definitely think they want to go to places where the coaches can bring the best out of them. In the early part of his career, it was Chad Scott and Neal Brown who were able to do that. He
Yeah.
definitely had his moments. He had a really big run against Ohio University for WVU, but if you're going to leave WVU, to me, it makes a lot of sense to go back to a place where, or go to a place where you're with people who coached you during the early parts of your career
Sure.
and who obviously it was really working for him. So I definitely, as far as like not getting looks from higher teams, I really wasn't able to look at the other teams who really were looking for him, or if he even visited anywhere else. It felt like
Yeah, I mean,
it felt like he picked North Texas fairly quickly.
yeah, I mean, from what I've heard and even what he put out there, he visited North Texas pretty soon after officially officializing going in the portal and leaving West Virginia, and there weren't really that many other teams in on it. And I can tell you from even talking to another coach, not at North Texas, but just who knows him well, there's a concern about how he's going to recover from the injury and where he is on his rehab. He's posted some videos on IG, but there are some coaches who are worried about if what we're seeing on, Luke, Instagram is not always reality. Okay. He looks great in the videos on IG, but I have flat heard from coaches who have maybe, it seems like, seen him in person or been around him or have seen more than IG. They're not sure that IG is telling the whole story. So maybe that's why. But I cannot confirm that any other Power 4 school was definitely in on him. And I would think that if as much as you're in with Neal Brown, and you love Neal Brown, and maybe even Chad Scott's a bigger deal than Neal Brown, because he almost left West Virginia a year ago because Chad Scott was leaving and they had to be convinced to stay. He stays to play under Rich Rod. Steve Slayton said, "You'll be great under Rich Rod." We just didn't get to see it really because of the injury. But Chad Scott was enough reason for him almost to leave at that point. And maybe going back to Chad Scott, his position coach, even more than the head coach, is even a bigger deal. And Neal Brown kind of told him, "Hey, I'm going to bring Chad Scott back here." It's also interesting, and we're not going to do a whole segment on it. But if you recall, Luke, the conversation around Chad Scott was when he was first going to stay at West Virginia. Well, why? You probably have the most value of any of these assistant coaches. You could get a better job elsewhere. You can get more money elsewhere. He eventually got to Texas, did get more money, did get to a better program, etc. But only there for 1 year. It didn't work out. And it appears that Chad Scott's value has also decreased a little bit. So they can try to repair their images together. But I do think Jahiem White's injury and his rehab with his injury is part of this. But players go to schools for money and also for the coaches. They want the relationship more than anything else. But I mean, if this was a year earlier, we wouldn't have to wonder how many Power Four schools were in on him. It would be all over social media. I mean, it would have been a bonanza. That was not the case, clearly. So the injury or whatever else certainly impacted Jahiem White's value around the country negatively, but maybe he'll crush it at North Texas. Wouldn't put it past him. You look what they're doing down there. They lost a lot of players too, but I wouldn't put it past the Fighting Neal Browns to have a good season and for him to put up some yards and be in a weird argument at the end of the year for do they deserve the CFP? Who knows? It's an easier schedule. Jaheim's still a stud if he can get healthy. So we'll see if Rodney Gallagher ends up there. Now, Rodney Gallagher is taking visits to some Power Fours. I don't think he wants to be at a G4, but I'm sure, or a G5, but I'm sure that he can lean on Neal Brown if he has no other options. He did visit Arizona, is one Power Four school that he did visit. But I'll just throw this out there. Knowing the Gallagher family and how close they are and how much of a close-knit group they are, and this is what I will miss about covering him, and you're really covering the whole family when you cover Rodney Gallagher, by the way, for any media members around the country. If they don't like something, they're going to tell you in your DMs. They want you to know something. They want to correct something that somebody said. They're going to tell you in your DMs. You're going to see them around all the time. Like they're going to every game. They're everywhere. And they're going to come up to you. You're going to talk to them. They want a relationship with you. They actually want to be friendly with you, but they'll tell you if they don't like something. And they're doing the family thing for a player the right way for me. But I'm a little surprised that he would even consider Arizona. Not that they're a bad team. They did turn it around from 2 years ago to where they were last year. They ended ranked. That's far for the Gallagher family. That is from Western PA, Laurel Highlands, the southern part of Western PA, closer to West Virginia than, say, Pitt campus, but Western PA, that family's going to be really building up some freaking flyer miles and really be doing a lot of traveling if he goes there, because I'd imagine they still want to be at every game. I wouldn't be shocked if he goes there and we see the Gallagher family has moved to Arizona, because they're going to be, they want to be around him. They want to make it a whole family thing. And that is a far journey for a family man in Rodney Gallagher, but it does suck to see him go. But, to be fair too, the hype that he had coming in as a recruit, it was never lived up to. I don't have to say it was never lived up to. It just wasn't. He was a 4-star recruit. He was a great high school player. You had to give him some time as an athlete to change positions and be good. But Neal Brown never used them enough. Rich Rod never used them enough. Maybe they didn't see enough in practice. He never was dominating any practices that I saw. He never dominated any individual games. He had some moments, the game-winning touchdown against Kansas, all the jet sweeps, solid game in the brawl this past year, which was cool. He did a lot for the area with the Children's Hospital and Grief Awareness Day. People from Pittsburgh and West Virginia all love him. I mean, he's very popular all around the region, but it just never was what it was supposed to be. I mean, he was even saying the program's going to change because of me. It didn't change because of him. He was not good enough to do that at the Power 4 level. In all reality, he probably would be best served. He's the one player that probably should go to North Texas, and he might become a stud there for his final year of eligibility at the Group of 5 level. He maybe should do that. Maybe in retrospect, he should have been there all along, but definitely wish the Gallagher family well, wish Gallagher well, and same thing for Jahiem White, but just a little interesting end to this, that his value clearly fell backwards. And, you can always look at where the players that are leaving you end up at. And in the past several years, a lot of the players that would leave West Virginia would end up at better schools or other Power Fours, lateral moves or better. The players leaving West Virginia this time around are not ending up at better schools. I mean, you can read into that what it is. That's not what we're seeing so far. A lot of it's North Texas, Marshall. There's a few Power Fours. You're not seeing any of these giants pluck these players that you did see occasionally before. Mountaineer Report here, West Virginia Sports Now, Luke Blain, Mike Asti, and we're going to wrap things up here. Our first show of the new year, first show since our break a little bit, with some hoops talk. So Ross Hodge has had his team play into the new year. We've seen this team play a couple games actually into the new year and play in Big 12 play. they didn't do enough in out of conference play to make this a comfortable experience at all. We talked about on past shows that they dropped some games they shouldn't have dropped, and by losing them, they really need to have a dominant spring in order to have a chance to make the tournament. Certainly need to do well and probably win at least 10 games in Big 12 play. They're 1-1 right now. They beat Cincinnati, but had to crawl to the victory. Not really an impressive win. They drop in Ken Palm, and Iowa State handled them. They took care of business like they should at home. They got Kansas coming up. Mountaineers have beat Kansas in recent years, even on rough seasons. We even saw that from DeVries's team a year ago. But that's still a ranked Kansas team, even if they're not as great as maybe in past years. They're still a ranked team. West Virginia at home, but likely the underdog here going in for most experts. Where are you in the state of West Virginia basketball here? A couple games into Big 12 play, now into the new year with a big game coming up, because that would at least be a quality win. They need to add those. They just don't have enough of those on the resume right now.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I do think that there is something to take away for Cincinnati where they were in a situation where even if it was in the final minute, they had the lead and they were able to close it out. That is not something they have been able to
True.
do. Particularly Ohio State and Clemson stand out. But I definitely think that there's opportunity here to try to keep that ball rolling. These are the types of games right here where you can say, yeah, you beat Cincinnati in a rock fight at home.
Yeah.
Not exactly something you want to say. That's not like, I mean, winning is good, but it's not the most positive indicator. It wasn't like last year
Yeah.
whenever they went up by 30 on Oklahoma State at home. So but Kansas is a good team with some high-end talent. Darren Peterson is finally getting to stay steadily in the lineup more after battling an injury. In 6 games, he's averaging 22 and a half points per game. Kansas has some really good height at the guard position, particularly Darren Peterson's 6'6", Trey White 6'7", Melvin Council Jr. is 6'4".
Yeah.
So that is one area where they do have the edge over WVU. And a lot of defense, as WVU wants to play it, is being able to get up and contest those shots, particularly from long range on the perimeter. I mean, Honor Huff is, I think, 5'10". Jasper
Yeah, I was
Floyd's a
gonna
little bit
say
shorter. So
you're
it's
not going to
like
see a guard
yeah,
to guard. You're not going to see that
yes.
guard matchup back to back, big mano a mano, because Honor Huff just would not be able to hang with those taller
Yes.
guards guarding him.
You're
They would
gonna
dominate. Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna have to be able to stay up with them in terms of scoring. And I honestly think Cincinnati was very emblematic of how this team needs to be able to win if that's what they're going to do. I mean, in this state where it doesn't seem like their offensive system is fully figured out, they've shown some flashes. I highlighted a
Yeah.
play that they had against Ohio State where Honor Huff set a down screen for Harlan Obioha that got him an open look. That was cool. I would love to see more of that. But in the last game for WVU against Cincinnati, Honor Huff had 24, Chance Moore had 14, Trayson Eaglestaff had 10, including that huge turnaround
Yeah.
jumper in the clutch at the end, which I think was a great moment for him. And I think it would be awesome if he could continue to build off of that
Yeah.
and make some more of those shots. I mean, my friend Bryce Cohen told me this. He said whenever Trayson Eaglestaff just doesn't think about it, he shoots very well. And you
Yeah.
can tell whenever he does think about it, whenever he does hesitate, and whenever he lets he doesn't take the open looks and then shoots the contested three. Those are the ones that miss. But I mean, just him turning around and just playing basketball in the final seconds helped win WVU that game against Cincinnati. So I think that they held Cincinnati to their second lowest point total of the season. That's a huge thing. You kind of have to be able to drag these teams into the mud with you in terms of struggling to score the ball, because WVU definitely has. That's not a secret. They have struggled to do that so far this season, but you are going to have to find a way to do it against Kansas, because I don't know. I can't confidently say that the defense for WVU is 100% there to slow Kansas down as much as they did Cincinnati so that they can hang in there and win that game. Kansas is a different beast, even though they aren't what they have been.
Yeah.
There's gonna need to be some offensive response, and this could be the game that fans look to Trace and Eagle staff, because you definitely need that second punch along with Honor Huff.
Yeah, and that's where I was going to go because we just have to go there. And that's been the talking point most of the season, which is why you do feel good for Eagle staff to hit that shot, have that moment, have Hodge be able to sing his praises. I'm sure Ross Hodge, if Eagle staff keeps going like this, Luke, will even feel vindicated himself because as a good coach has to do as a leader of the team, if Eagle staff has become the main person criticized from the fans, Hodge took that on, and now it's both of them. So if Eagle staff has a rough season overall and does not pick it up at all, and it ends up being this hot and cold and mostly cold run and a really disappointing year at West Virginia after all the points he scored in the past, then Hodge, who has continuously defended him, continuously stuck up for him, even kind of felt like was a little frustrated with some questions that were being asked about him, would also take it on as swinging and missing on a transfer edition. We just talked West Virginia football having a rough year one and doing better in year two recruiting. Well, part of the rough year one was they swung and missed on transfer editions all throughout that roster. Eagle staff was supposed to come in and at least be the number 2 player on this team if they're going to be good, and he's probably been the 4th or 5th best player outside of that moment or two. That needs to be more. They need to get more from him. But if you don't get more than say what you've had from him so far, and it just is this roller coaster ride, maybe a moment or two, but you never get more. You never get a truly 20 plus big game against a power Big 12 team, then that looks like Hodge swung and missed on the addition, didn't evaluate him well, and that's why the team's probably not going to be in the tournament. But if he can pick this up, then maybe they can elevate themselves because as much as they've been great defensively and they've always had an effort defensively, which is what Hodge commands, offensively they've just been so inconsistent. But it is a nice bright spot that they held a lead because they'd have 2 or 3 more wins on the board if they could hold leads in the final minute. They blew leads this year in games that they should have. Clemson they should have beat. Ohio State they probably should have beat. And they lose Ohio State in multiple OTs, and Clemson, they end up going over in one of their trips because they couldn't hang on in that Clemson game. So it puts you behind the 8 ball going into Big 12 play. It is a stacked Big 12, a lot of ranked teams, a lot of teams in front of you that already have Big 12 wins, that have more Big 12 wins than you. You've already lost a game to Iowa State, who's a top-tier team. A game against Kansas is a big barometer of really how good this team is. If they get blown out, people are going to say, well, Cincinnati is just not that good. They're an average team, and their coach went on a rant after losing to you. That's just a win, but you didn't even play all that well. You're going to lose a lot of Big 12 games. If you beat Kansas, then you can maybe say, okay, we're not on Iowa State's level. They mop the floor with us, but we can hang with enough of these teams here to get enough wins to at least be on the bubble, and maybe your bubble doesn't get burst this season. That's kind of what you got to hope for at this point now. You got to have this roster be healthy the rest of the way, and it will be difficult against Kansas to hide Hunter Huff on the defensive end because, I mean, we just saw an NBA All-Star get traded because he can't do anything on the defensive end and is a great scorer in Trae Young. That's a very similar comparison to Hunter Huff in college here. He is a small scorer that is undersized in most matchups, can't really hang defensively, but can score with anybody. And you're facing a team that is much bigger than you. And he puts the effort in on defense, but he has to do a lot. He really can't handle matchup to matchup. And he's had his moments at point guard as well as just being the scorer on this team, and his mental lapses, even going to that Ohio State game, were a problem there, even though he wasn't traditionally supposed to play point prior to that, even though he's done it in his past. So we'll see how this lineup looks. We'll see how this team looks. We'll see how they play from opening tip all the way through, which is what they need to do. They haven't done that all year, but they had to get the Cincinnati win. I mean, that was a must win because that was going to be one of the weaker teams you play through January. They at least do have that on the board. Granted, they did drop in KenPom despite the win. So Kansas can be something for you. And yeah, they're not who they were in years past. This is not a team with 3 or 4 draft picks, but it maybe has one, and they're still ranked. It's not like they're bad. I feel like people do get hung up too much with the blue bloods of, well, they're not as good as they were in the past. This team can hang with them. Well, I mean, just because they're not as good as they were in the past does not mean they're still not very, very good. They're ranked for a reason, and they deserve to be there. Luke Blain, Mike Asti here, Mountaineer Report, West Virginia Sports Now. Did you hear what Ross Hodge also had to say a little bit? I believe this was more during his radio show this week, but I did see when he was asked about where he thinks the program is right now, and they're only in the middle of year one, it's still early in year one, and he's still trying to implement the system, the culture. It's been a roller coaster ride. You can't evaluate the tenure on, half of one season, even though some fans like to do. But he kind of gave a semi-honest answer of saying we're not there yet. We're not where we want to be yet. This is just paraphrasing. I like to focus where I am right now. I don't want to look too far ahead. It's game to game, etc. But he made it very clear that he's not in any way satisfied with even the overall spot of the program beyond just how they're playing and the team, but NIL and recruiting and the vibe and all of that. He's done very well in high school recruiting. We're not really going to know NIL Bank until we see what maybe he does after fully 1 year in and what the donations look like then. But because he was living off some money from a past regime and money that was put in at that time, and Rich Rod using a little bit more of the bank for the program athletically, for the athletic department than maybe in years past. But any thoughts on kind of a candid Ross Hodge that, hey, we've done really well in recruiting for high school and, we still have a chance this year, but he made it sound like they're further away than some fans would like them to be. I guess you can kind of read into that a little bit. It doesn't mean that it's a factual case and that they can't win next year. They won't win this year, but he didn't seem like somebody that was thrilled, to death on where the program is in the middle of year one. I'll try to find the exact quote, actually.
Well, I think that just based off what you're telling me, I think that there's some important context when it comes to I think a lot of that probably is inspired by the idea of wanting to win now and have success now, because you are about to graduate, I think, 7 players going
Yeah.
into this offseason, all of the starters plus Chance Moore and Jackson Fields off the bench. So I think that, the biggest issue this year has been getting all these new guys together, implementing that system, implementing that culture, and then, you know, you're going to have to turn around and do that a good bit next year as well, because you are going to
Yeah.
lose at least 7 players, assuming you don't lose too many guys in the transfer portal either. I will say, from the way the freshmen talk about him, and Amir Jenkins and DJ Thomas specifically, we haven't seen or heard from anybody else truly about him. They sound really bought into what Hodge is trying to do. They sound like
They
they're
play like a team
excited
bought
about
in,
him.
certainly
Yeah,
defensively. They
they
play like they're
absolutely
bought
do.
in. Yeah.
DJ Thomas does, or DJ Thomas and Amir Jenkins both
Yeah.
do. Amir Jenkins specifically on the defensive side just
Yeah.
defends like a maniac. So even if you keep everybody you're able to, you have to fill 7 spots going into next season. That's 7 new guys, that's 7 new players, and a lot of it is going to be the front court, a
Yeah.
position that has been very hot and cold this season. And we're talking about, the way that Trayson Eaglestaff has struggled this season. I think that has really retracted a lot of the attention away from Harlan Obioha, who I don't believe has performed the best he can either.
That's fair.
They've lost a lot of the front court
Since
battles
the
in
Pitt
these
game. I think
games.
since the Pitt game. In the Pitt
Yes.
game,
Oh,
he was an
yes.
impact
Pit,
player.
pit game. Pit
But
game. He was very, very good.
but he's never been that again. He's never been
No.
what he was in the Pitt game. And we even talked after the brawl that if you can get that from him, it'll help make up for your lack of size in other positions. And then he could be a
Yeah.
contender. And you're going to need that play from him in the Big 12. We've not seen that from him since then, and certainly didn't see it in any of the important games after that.
Yeah, and I think Harlan Obioha, and I say that because I think he does have a higher ceiling than what he's hitting right now. I have a lot of respect for him as a player, but when
Yeah.
it comes down to, the players outside are having a hard time getting shots off, and they're having a hard time, restricting the other team's players on the outside. You need to be able to step up on the inside, and I think Brennan Lorient has done a good job of that there. I think Jackson Fields, given his opportunities, and DJ Thomas has been very steady. Harlan Obioha has had a lot of peaks and valleys, and a lot more valleys than peaks recently. So, but I
Yeah.
think whenever you take that into the greater context, getting back to your point, if you're not able to fully put it together this year, because Hodge has said, sometimes you don't hit your ceiling with the team, sometimes you don't reach your
Right.
full potential because you only have so
Right.
much limited time with them. I don't want to say I part of me wonders how confident are you that you're able to do it next year whenever you are going to have pretty major roster turnover.
I know, but the
And
pressure's going to be on then because
exactly.
as much as that's being fair, and nobody reasonable should have expected the sun, moon, the stars in year one from any coach. Darren DeVries, people don't want to hear his name, but Darren DeVries came in and in 1 year had a 10-win turnaround, and everybody would agree they probably should have made the NCAA tournament. They had multiple
Mhm.
top 10 wins. They had big wins on the board, and you built a team around really a couple stars and a bunch of role players. His son, of course, that's the whole thing that fans are also annoyed by, only played 8 games. So you had Javon Small playing most of the season as the Lone Ranger, and the Lone Ranger of Javon Small and a bunch of role players almost got that team in the NCAA tournament. It feels like off of recruiting, off of the roster, off of whatever, and it might not be fair, but there are going to be fans that are going to say, well, if you're not even on the bubble this year, Ross Hodge, why do you need all these years and all this time? And now, Luke, you're even saying that maybe you got to give him a mulligan for next year as well. It might be fair to do that, but there are going to be fans that are going to say, are you not as good of a coach, either a recruiter or next to those coaches, Darren DeVries, then? Because Darren DeVries in 1 year walked in after a 9-win season that was so bad and put them into a situation where they really should have been in the NCAA tournament. You need
Yeah,
2
well,
years to get to that point. Like that I'm not saying it's fair, but that's
no,
going to
yeah.
be said. So we have to see where they are. But if they don't even get on the bubble this year, they're not even in the discussion, they're going to have pressure next year because the end of Huggins got them in one time, but they weren't really a contender. They were one and done in 2023. Then the scandal. Eilert's year was the worst in program history. Then you have DeVries missing. That would then this year would be 3 years in a row to miss the NCAA tournament and put pressure on next year. Luke, there has not been a 4-year stretch of the Mountaineers not in the NCAA tournament 4 years in a row since, off the top of my head, I'm going to the 90s. They didn't do that this century at all with Beeline, Huggins to now. You have 31 tournament appearances. It's not like that. It's that often where they are missing that many years in a row. And yes, there's circumstances off scandal and Eiler being interim and then DeVries gets snubbed. I get it. But the weight of all of that is going to be on Hodge to, at minimum, get in at some point here coming up. I mean, I don't
Yeah,
think
no,
he has this 5-year runway to let them build this like he did at North Texas.
no, for sure, and that's what I'm getting at too. I'm not trying to sit here and say treat year two as if it's another year one for Hodge. What I'm
Right.
saying is, from what I'm hearing in those comments on the radio show, is man, not being able to put it together this year yet. It almost to me it strikes me as worry. I don't want to say, I don't know if worry would be the right term, but maybe concern that hey, as the coach, like if I'm sitting in Hodges' seat, I'm thinking I have to do this again next year in terms of
Yeah.
replace at least
Yeah.
7 players. And I think that's what those comments could be revealing. I'm not saying you alleviate the pressure at all. I do think there should be pressure
I
on
have the
Hodge
quote
going
now
into
here
next
too that
season.
I'll put out there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. So I'm like I'm not trying to say give him more time or be more lenient with him going into next season. I think you should absolutely still have the same standards. But I think if you're Hodge, you have to look at this season and be, hey, haven't hit the ceiling like, we've wanted to. How do you remedy that going into next year?
Yeah, and I would imagine that number one, even though again Honor House has been great and been consistent, best player, most valuable player on this team so far, you got to get, and this has been said for years, you got to get more size. I mean, I asked Hodge a literal question in one of the Zooms recently. Does size matter? He kind of smirked and yeah, it does. And it does. It just does matter. It does, especially in Big 12 play. To build a team that is led by Honor Huff at his size is hard. It would be better if he was your number two. It would be better if you had more size than just a couple guys down low. And then if one's having an off night, then you're kind of in trouble. You're relying a lot more on youth to be your only player with size in Thomas. It's just a risky recipe. And yes, as you kind of were saying, is maybe a possibility because of the confidence that Eagle staff built with the Cincinnati big shot. And he granted only had 10 points despite the big shot. But if he can take that and then put up bigger performances in Big 12 play, That takes pressure away from Hodge, takes pressure away from Honor Huff, takes pressure away from even the lack of size in other spots. But unless somebody is hitting outside looks and adding a scoring touch to Honor Huff, his lack of size, your lack of size in general, will really be evident in Big 12 play. And as great as you are defensively, you got to be able to score probably 70 points in these games to win them on a regular basis. They're barely getting over 60. Like, they're just not there. They need more offense. They need one more player to step up, and it should be Eagle staff. It's supposed to be Eagle staff. It's not been him yet. That was a great moment for him. We'll see if we get more moments from him moving forward, and they will need them. And just to get the full-on quote here to kind of corroborate what I was saying, this is from Hodge on his radio show about the overall state of the program. I think it's fair to say this, but it just, again, I think this makes it clear that they are not where they want to be or where fans thought they maybe would be so quickly. And I quote from Hodge, "Work in progress, far from being anywhere close to what we want to be or can be, our potential. I like where we've grown through our experiences. You try to stay as in the moment as you can, so you're not too reflective on everything." And then moving on, in terms of the team right now for this season, and this goes to the Cincinnati after the Cincinnati game. So he's talking about that matchup. "We held them scoreless for 4 minutes while in a dire situation. That's what you got to want to be able to do. I like how we share the ball on offense. More importantly than that, this group takes ultimate accountability. They don't finger point, they take ownership. That's how you improve." That part there, I think, is a major point to this. And we've even seen that with Eagle staff and everybody else all year. They do take accountability. They do put that on themselves. They don't complain. They don't make excuses. Eagle staffs put it on himself every time he talks. He doesn't make excuses. You like that. You want to hear that for sure. That's true. They, for the most part, play hard, even though he, for example, was benched earlier in the season for maybe lack of hustle on defense. They are solid defensively, which is about hustle. But hearing far from where we want to be, again, it's year one, so it's a fair thing to say, but it does make you believe that he's trying to also calm down a little bit of the pressure by saying this will be a journey. And, you know, if we happen to miss the NCAA tournament for a couple of years, it does not mean that in year three we couldn't make a Sweet 16 run. It does depend on what you do recruiting wise. And I don't think the standard should come down at all. I do think if they miss this year, you can say that it's year one and Hodge needs more time and it's not fair to hold the past against him. That's totally legit and fair. And I do like him as a coach. But it will put more pressure on year two. I mean, I think it's also fair, and maybe we'll close with this, Luke. Tell me if you think at least this part is fair. If we are going to say that Rich Rodriguez, at minimum, with a Hall of Fame resume, has to make a minimum bowl game in year two, or we're concerned how long he should be the head coach, and maybe the tenure shouldn't go as long as the contract after being so bad in year one, would it then not be fair to say Ross Hodge, at minimum, is going to have to at least be on the bubble in year two if he misses in year one, or else you're concerned about the trajectory of the tenure? Again, making the tournament being the bar, I don't think is unreasonable at a program like West Virginia.
Yeah, I think whenever it comes to that, I think that's very reasonable. And, it's not like the blueprint wasn't there for them to do that this season. If you at least beat Ohio State and Clemson, and then,
Yeah.
well, you don't even have to worry about the Xavier loss if you beat Clemson because you're
Yeah.
going to go right
Just win one
into
of
and
those
play
games.
Georgia. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I think that, you know, that they've had the opportunity to be there and be somebody who's ranked higher than 74 in Ken Palm and in the
Yeah.
90s in net. Uh, and that's something that you look at next year, and is even though Hodge is going to have a similar situation, see how he can respond to that and see how he can bring the team into a situation where they're able to step in. It's not like in year one, Ross Hodge, you didn't expect them to go on the road and upset number three Iowa State, but
Sure.
beating Cincinnati is good, and you're probably not gonna. I know they're probably not going to be favored against Kansas and Houston on the road, but
Yeah.
these are the times where you say it's year one, those things can slip, whatever. But next year you do need to have more success in the non-conference specifically, and then you can start to look at them and say, all right, this is a bubble team now, somebody who can consistently go out there and produce and, control the games in the final minutes whenever you have the lead as well. And,
Yeah.
those are just situations that the team has been in. They haven't been able to execute as well as they needed to. I think situational basketball is definitely a place where this team needs to improve, and I think that's a good metric to measure the success of Ross Hodge and the team going into next year as well.
Yeah, and they're playing hard for him. They do appear
Yep.
bought in. That's all a feather in the cap of any head coach. It is year one, no matter what anybody thinks. He's obviously not getting fired in year one. That was never going to happen. Even if they lost every game, that was never going to happen. Nor should it. You got to give some time, but it will put more pressure on next year, depending on how this year finishes. If you finish strong, even if you miss out, then everyone will fight for you and say, "Okay, you're a great coach. Let's see next year." But if you know, flush it down and putter down the season, there's going to be some concern, even though the high school recruiting's been okay. It's going to matter what you do in the portal to replace those 7 players in particular. And you cannot really swing and miss. If Eagle Staff's a swing and miss, you can't swing and miss on one of your top 2 players on a basketball team. If they're both transfers, you got to hit on them. I mean, that's just simply put. If Eagle Staff ends up being a swing and miss and they don't make the tournament, that's a major reason why. Whether it's fair to the kid or not, it's a team. It's not one guy. But it's harder for everybody if a top tier player does struggle. And maybe, as you mentioned with Bryce, maybe it is a mental thing. I mean, kind of, that's been alluded to. I guess that on an early one of these shows that maybe it could be that. And there are sports psychologists that are on staff, by the way, there. So I'd love to know if he talked to one. Maybe we can find that out. But we've seen a little different vibe from him. Maybe he did. I mean, we've seen something different from him in recent games, and we'll see where that goes. We'll see where Honor Huff goes. We'll see what this team does. And then you also, I believe, have a Baylor at the end of the month. It does not get easy. It is not
Yeah.
easier in this conference, but the benefits of being in this conference, if you do get some wins, they're all quality wins. And yeah, they just squandered the opportunities. So as much as even people that really want to defend Ross Hodge, and again, I like the guy, as you were saying, they had opportunities with this roster, this situation in year one to have a better record right now and a better metric situation right now. They blew games they should have won despite all the adversity this year. And if you add 1 or 2 more of those games as victories, not only do they have more wins, obviously, but their Ken Palm's probably 20 points better. I mean, you didn't have to worry about the Ohio State loss if you would have just beat Clemson. And the
Yeah.
quality, you know, the quality wins need to come and be more plentiful. Beating Pitt is an emotional W, but check into what Pitt's doing. Anyone who has not been following. I mean, they're not even on any bubble conversation. They've been horrendous this year. So that not even a quality win, unfortunately, despite it being a Power 4 victory. For Luke Blain, I'm Mike Asti. That'll do it for this now New Year edition of Mountaineer Report here with West Virginia Sports Now, our first show of the new year. Obviously, more of these to come as the basketball season continues on in Big 12 play and the football staff continues to recruit and continues to make it so you can't even take a bathroom break before they announce another commitment. But this will slow down in another week or so. But yes, I expect much more work to come here and a lot more reason to check in with West Virginia Sports Now, even throughout this weekend.